"You're nothing but dead weight, Dad. Pack your things and get out." Those were the words my son hurled at me on Thanksgiving Eve, his voice sharp enough to slice through decades of sacrifice. He didn't whisper it. He didn't say it in shame. He said it standing tall, with his wife at his side, as if throwing me out of the house was an act of courage. I stood there, clutching the flannel shirt I had folded only minutes before, my hands trembling not from age, but from disbelief. This was my son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the boy I once carried on my shoulders through summer fairs, the boy I swore I would protect no matter the cost. And now he looked at me as though I were a stranger who had overstayed his welcome. The suitcase waiting at my feet wasn't just packed with clothes. It was packed with a lifetime of loyalty, reduced to boxes they couldn't wait to shove out the door. I should have begged for mercy. I should have fought back. But instead, I walked into the November cold, the door slamming behind me like a coffin lid. The November night swallowed me whole as I stepped off their porch. My breath fogged in the cold air, every exhale a reminder of how quickly life can turn from warmth to frost. The suitcase dragged behind me like an anchor, wheels rattling over the cracked driveway, echoing louder than my son's words but never drowning them out. For a long moment, I just stood there at the curb, staring at the house I had once helped him buy. My mind wandered back to the day he signed the papers. I had been so proud, helping him paint the nursery, fixing the gutters, laying down the garden soil for his first home. Back then I thought, this is what all those years of hard work were for. For him. For his future. Now I realized I had simply built a home that I would one day be thrown out of. I slid my suitcase into the back of my old Ford pickup, a machine as weary as I was. The door creaked when I opened it, the seat springs groaning like old bones as I sat down. My reflection in the rearview mirror startled me, a 63-year-old man with lines carved deep from decades of labor, and eyes that seemed older still. Behind me, the porch light flickered once before going out completely. Symbolism rarely comes that clear, but it hit me square in the chest. I was no longer welcome. I turned the key. The truck coughed, sputtered, then roared reluctantly to life. The vibration shook through my hands, steadying me in a way my son's rejection could not. For a few seconds, I sat idle, staring at the front window where their silhouettes stood. Derek's arm rested across Cheryl's shoulder, their faces barely visible, but their posture unmistakable relief. They weren't heartbroken, they weren't conflicted. They were glad to see me leave. I drove slowly down the street, past houses glowing with golden light. Families gathered around dining tables, laughter spilling through windows into the night air. I tried not to imagine what I was missing, what I thought I'd always have. A grandchild climbing into my lap. A family meal with stories and second helpings. Instead, all I had was the hum of the engine and the sting of betrayal echoing in my ears. The diner's neon sign appeared like a beacon in the distance. I pulled in, the tires crunching over fresh frost. Inside, the warmth smelled of coffee and frying bacon. A waitress with tired eyes and a smile that looked practiced but kind slid a menu across the counter. "Late night, huh?" she asked. I just nodded. Words felt heavy, and besides, I couldn't explain in a sentence what had just unraveled in my life. I sipped on black coffee I couldn't afford, staring into the dark surface as though it might hold answers. My hands shook slightly when I lifted the cup. Was it the cold, or was it fear? At 63, I was homeless, unemployed, and estranged from the only family I thought I had left. That thought pressed down on me like the weight of the entire night sky. I thought back to the early years. I had raised Derek alone after his mother left when he was 12. I worked double shifts in construction, breaking my back so he could have cleats for baseball, so he could go on school trips, so he wouldn't feel the absence of a mother as sharply. I remembered patching up scraped knees, standing in bleachers through pouring rain, clapping the loudest when he made the smallest plays. Every sacrifice I made, every dream I set aside, I did it for him. And now he had reduced me to a burden, dismissed decades of sacrifice as dead weight. I wanted to believe Cheryl had twisted his heart, that it wasn't really Derek speaking. But deep down, I knew he'd made his choice. He wanted space, he wanted freedom, and freedom for him meant exile for me. When I left the diner, the night had grown colder, flakes of snow beginning to fall. I drove aimlessly, headlights cutting through the dark, carrying me nowhere and everywhere at once. Each mile stretched like a question I couldn't answer. Where do I go now? Who am I without family, without purpose? 3 hours later, somewhere along a rural highway outside of Columbus, the world handed me an answer I didn't expect. My headlights swept across a stranded car on the shoulder, a burgundy sedan, hood steaming, hazard lights blinking. A man stood outside waving desperately, his breath clouding in the frigid air. Inside the car, I glimpsed the outline of a woman and two small figures in the back seat. Children. I slowed down, my instinct telling me to keep driving. I had enough problems of my own. I was nearly broke, living out of a truck that might die any moment. Helping strangers in the middle of the night on a slick road was foolish. But then I saw the man's shoulders slump when another car sped past him without stopping. I remembered how it felt only hours ago to be abandoned, to be looked at as if you didn't matter, and something inside me wouldn't let me drive on. I pulled over, flicked on my hazard lights, and stepped into the biting wind. The man approached cautiously. He looked younger than Derek, maybe in his 30s, with worry etched across his face. "Thank you for stopping," he said quickly, relief pouring out of his voice. "I'm Marcus. That's my wife, Elena, and our daughter's in the back. Radiator blue, I think. We've been stuck here over an hour." I extended my hand. "Name's Walter," I replied, my voice rough from disuse. His grip was firm, the kind of handshake only a working man gives. He explained how roadside assistance couldn't come for at least 4 more hours, maybe longer because of the weather. 4 hours in this cold, with children in the car, wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous. I looked under the hood. The sweet smell of coolant confirmed his suspicion. A blown hose. Nothing I could fix on the roadside. "I don't have towing gear," I admitted, "but I've got straps. I can pull you into town, if you're willing to risk it." His eyes lit up, gratitude rushing in. "Please, yes, of course. I'll pay you whatever you want." I thought about my thin wallet, the $75 left, the uncertainty of where I'd even sleep that night. A tow like this could have bought me a warm bed, maybe groceries for a week. But I shook my head. "No charge. Let's just get your family home." He stared like I'd just spoken a foreign language. "Sir, I can't let you." I said, "Don't worry about it." I cut him off gently. My hands were already reaching for the straps. It took nearly 20 minutes to secure the car. Marcus insisted on steering the sedan, while Elena and the girls climbed into my cab. The woman moved carefully, her belly round beneath her coat, pregnant, maybe 6 or 7 months along. The little girls pressed against me on the bench seat, their dark eyes wide, but not frightened, well-raised kids. "This is Sophia," Elena said softly, placing a protective hand on one girl's shoulder. "And this is Isabella. Girls, say thank you to Mr. Walter." "Thank you, Mr. Walter," they chimed in unison, voices sweet as bells. I forced a smile, though something in my chest ached at the sound. For the first time in months, I felt like someone's presence mattered, if only to 2 little girls on a snowy highway. Elena settled the girls against me as I eased the truck back onto the highway. The snow was falling harder now, the road slick beneath the tires. Sophia pressed close to my right side, her little head resting against my arm, while Isabella fought to stay awake, her eyelids fluttering with exhaustion. Elena rubbed her belly gently, every gesture protective, maternal. For a while, the only sounds were the hum of the engine and the rhythmic swish of the wipers. I concentrated on keeping my speed steady, mindful of the heavy sedan dragging behind us. Each curve of the road demanded patience, each hill a careful negotiation. In the silence, I felt something shift, a strange peace amid the storm, as though this family, strangers only minutes ago, had pulled me into a world where I was not invisible. Elena finally spoke. Her voice was warm, calm, even with fatigue lacing it. "We live outside of Delaware, small town, quiet. Marcus grew up there. We moved back 5 years ago when his business took off. What business is that? I asked, not looking away from the road. Real estate development. Commercial mostly. He works hard, harder than anyone I know. She smiled faintly, though I caught it only in the corner of my eye. But he works for us, for the girls, for this family. I nodded, tightening my grip on the wheel as the truck fishtailed slightly before regaining traction. Sounds like a good man. He is, she replied softly. He carries a lot on his shoulders, but he never lets it break him. She shifted in her seat, her hand brushing over her belly. We're blessed, Walter, more than we deserve sometimes, and tonight we're blessed because you stopped. I didn't answer. The gratitude in her words pressed against the hollow inside me, where Derek's rejection still echoed. Isabella stirred then, lifting her head. Mr. Walter, she whispered. Are you a grandpa? The question caught me off guard. I swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the snowy road. No, sweetheart, not a grandpa. Would you like to be? She asked, her voice so innocent it pierced me deeper than any insult ever had. I cleared my throat, forcing the lump down. Maybe someday. M.O. She nodded solemnly, as though filing my answer away, then rested her head back against my arm. Within minutes, she was asleep. Elena watched the exchange silently, her eyes glistening in the dim light. You're good with children, she observed. I raised my son alone, I said, words slipping out before I could stop them. You learn. That must have been difficult. It was worth it, I lied. The truth tasted bitter. We drove on, the girls' soft breathing filling the cab. I could almost imagine they were my granddaughters, that I belonged in this quiet tableau of warmth. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't just an old man driving aimlessly through the night. I was part of something, if only temporarily. As we neared their town, the road changed. No longer cracked asphalt lined with bare trees, but winding paths leading into manicured estates. The headlights swept across wrought iron gates and stone walls, driveways that curved endlessly into the dark. My heart sank. This wasn't the modest neighborhood I had pictured. Then the house came into view. No, it wasn't a house. It was a mansion. 3 stories of stone and timber rose from the snow-draped ground, windows glowing with golden light. A circular fountain, covered for winter, stood in the front drive. A garage stretched wider than my old high school gym. I slowed the truck, stunned into silence. Elena glanced at me, perhaps noticing my expression. Marcus worked very hard to build this life, she said gently, as if to explain away the excess. The front door burst open before we had even stopped. A woman in her 50s rushed out in slippers and a robe, her hair silvering at the edges, her face alive with relief. Thank goodness you're safe, she cried, wrapping Elena in a hug the moment she stepped down. This is Walter, Marcus called from behind the sedan as he unhooked the straps. He brought us home. See? The woman turned to me, eyes misty with gratitude. Bless you, she said, voice trembling. Bless you for helping them. I nodded awkwardly, hands itching for something to do, so I busied myself helping Marcus unfasten the tow lines. The whole time, the house loomed behind me, whispering of wealth and belonging I would never know. Walter, Marcus said firmly once we finished, please, come inside. It's freezing. Stay a while. I should get going, I muttered. The thought of sitting in that grand house made me feel small, exposed. But Elena shook her head. Absolutely not. It's nearly 4 in the morning. You've been driving in a storm, and you saved us. At least have coffee. Warm up, please. I hesitated, but then Sophia's sleepy voice cut through the air. Mr. Walter, are you coming in? Her little hand tugged at my coat, and just like that, I gave in. Inside, the house was breathtaking. Hardwood floors gleamed under chandeliers. A staircase curled elegantly toward the 2nd floor. Art lined the walls, rugs thick enough to swallow footsteps. The girls scampered ahead, their excitement bubbling over despite the hour. To them, I wasn't a stranger, I was a hero. The older woman, Maria, bustled about the kitchen, making hot chocolate for the children and coffee for us. The girls sat at the counter, whispering about their adventure like it was the grandest story they'd ever lived. Marcus gestured for me to follow him into a study. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, casting shadows across rows of bookshelves. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed me one. "To good Samaritans," he said. We clinked glasses. The burn of the liquor settled deep, warming me more than the fire. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus began, his eyes sharp, but not unkind. "Sure. Why did you stop? Why wouldn't you take money?" I stared into the flames, words slow to come. "Because I know what it's like to be stranded, to need help and have everyone pass you by." He studied me quietly. "That sounds like experience talking." The truth slipped out before I could catch it. "Yesterday, my son kicked me out, said I was a burden, gave me an hour to pack and leave." My voice cracked, the shame raw in my chest. Marcus's expression hardened. "Your own son?" I nodded. "I lost my job back in March. Been trying ever since, but no one wants to hire an old man. I stayed with him, helped where I could. But I guess charity has its limits, even from family." Silence filled the room, heavy and sharp. Marcus rose, walking to his desk. He picked up a framed photograph and studied it for a moment before placing it in my hands. The picture showed a man in work clothes, standing beside a boy who looked very much like Marcus. "That's my father," Marcus said softly. "David. He worked construction his whole life, died 10 years ago." I traced the edges of the frame, my throat tightening. The resemblance was striking, but it wasn't just that. It was the weariness in the older man's eyes, the same weariness I carried now. Marcus leaned back in his chair. "We fought when I was 16. I told him I hated him. Walked out, too proud to apologize. Spent years proving I didn't need him. By the time I was ready to make peace, it was too late." His voice broke. "I never got to tell him I forgave him. I've lived with that regret every single day." I lowered the photo slowly. "Marcus, why are you telling me this?" He met my eyes, steady, unblinking. "Because when I saw you tonight, I saw him. I saw the father I lost. And when you told me about your son, I saw a second chance." My pulse quickened. "A second chance for what?" Marcus took a breath. "Walter, I want you to stay. Not just tonight. Longer. Be part of our family. My girls, they've never had a grandfather. Elena and I, we've wanted someone like you in their lives. And you," he paused, voice firm, "you need family. Real family." The words hung between us, brighter than the fire, heavier than the storm outside. My mind raced, torn between disbelief and longing. Could this be real? Could strangers offer me what my own blood had cast aside? I set the whiskey down, hands trembling. "I don't want to be anyone's charity case." "This isn't charity," Marcus said. His voice was steady, resolute. "This is family. Something money can't buy. Something we can only give and choose." The fire popped loudly, the flames rising higher as though to seal the moment. I felt my chest tighten, breath catching as the impossible unfolded before me. For the first time in years, I dared to hope. I couldn't sleep that night. The guest room Marcus and Elena offered me was larger than my entire apartment. Back when I had one, with a bed so soft it nearly swallowed me whole. Yet I lay there staring at the ceiling, my thoughts restless. The house was silent, save for the occasional creak of settling wood and the faint hum of the heating system. Somewhere down the hall, 2 little girls slept peacefully, while their mother rested her weary body, and Marcus probably pored over plans or contracts in his study. And me? I was caught in the middle of disbelief and temptation. How could strangers, wealthy strangers at that, offer me something my own son had so easily discarded? I thought about Derek's face when he told me to leave, the coldness in his eyes, the relief when the door closed behind me. Then I thought about Sophia's sleepy voice, asking if I would come inside, Isabella's innocent question about whether I wanted to be a grandpa, Elena's gentle insistence that I wasn't just doing them a favor, I was saving them, and Marcus's words echoed the loudest. "This isn't charity. This is family." Sometime after dawn, a soft knock sounded on the door. I expected Marcus, but it was Elena. She carried a steaming mug, her robe wrapped tight around her pregnant belly. "Chamomile," she said with a kind smile. "Helps with sleep, though I'm too late for that, I think." "Thank you," I murmured, sitting up. She set the mug on the nightstand but didn't leave. Instead, she lowered herself into the armchair across from the bed, moving carefully. "Marcus told me what he asked you," she said plainly. Heat rushed to my cheeks. "I'm sorry if—" "Don't apologize." She raised a hand gently. "You should have a say in this. It's your life as much as ours." We sat in silence for a moment, her hand resting on her belly, mine wrapped around the warm mug. "Can I tell you something about my husband?" she asked finally. "Of course. When we first moved here 5 years ago, Marcus had everything: money, success, this house, but he was empty. He worked himself to exhaustion, trying to prove something to a father who wasn't around to see it. He carried guilt and regret like chains." She paused, her eyes glistening. 2 years ago, the girls had a grandparent day at school. All the other children had grandfathers there, reading, laughing, playing games. Our daughters sat alone. Marcus watched them, and I saw his heart break. That night, he cried in my arms. He said he wanted to break the cycle, to give our children the love he'd missed. And ever since, he's been looking for a way. Her words cut through me like a blade of light through fog. "And now he thinks I'm that way?" She leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "We both do. But not out of pity, Walter. You showed us who you are tonight. You could have driven past. You could have demanded money. Instead, you gave without asking anything in return. That's the kind of man we want around our children. That's the kind of man Marcus wishes he'd had as a father." I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened. All I could manage was, "But you don't know me." "Not really." Elena gave a small smile. "You think we invite just anyone into our home? Last night, while you and Marcus talked, I made some calls. Your old supervisor at the hardware store spoke about you like you were a legend. Said letting you go was the hardest decision of his career. Your former landlord described you as the kind of tenant every owner dreams of: helpful, respectful, responsible. These weren't favors, Walter. These were pieces of your life, and they told us everything we needed to know." I swallowed hard, stunned that she'd gone to such lengths. "Why tell me all this?" "Because I don't want you thinking this is impulsive. Marcus and we've been searching for someone like you without realizing it. You need family. We need family. The girls need a grandfather. And Marcus—" She trailed off, pressing a hand to her heart. "Marcus needs to give the love he never got the chance to give his father." Her words unlocked something in me, something I'd kept buried beneath layers of pride and pain. "What about what I need?" I asked quietly, surprising even myself. Elena tilted her head, her smile soft. "Then tell me, what do you need, Walter?" The question struck deep, like a hammer against a fragile wall. For months, I'd been consumed by what I'd lost: my job, my independence, my son's respect. I hadn't dared to ask myself what I actually needed. My voice shook when I finally said it. I need to matter. I need to feel like my life has purpose. Elena's eyes filled with tears. "And what would give you that purpose?" I thought of Isabella asking if I wanted to be a grandpa, of Sophia clutching my arm like she belonged there, of Marcus's earnest eyes across the fire, of Elena's quiet strength as she carried her family forward. "Being needed," I said at last, "not as charity, as family." Elena reached across the space between us, resting her hand lightly on mine. "Then maybe this is the place where you're meant to be." The sun was rising, spilling golden light across the snow-covered grounds outside the window. For the first time in a long while, that light didn't feel like it was shining on someone else's life. It felt like it was reaching for me. The weeks that followed blurred into something I had thought impossible. At first, I resisted. I told Marcus and Elena I couldn't impose, that I'd find a motel, that they'd already done too much. But every excuse was gently, firmly dismissed. Marcus offered me work, steady maintenance at several of his properties. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest labor, the kind I knew, the kind that gave me back dignity. Elena insisted I stay until I got on my feet, though she said it with such conviction that I wondered if she knew I'd never truly leave. And the girls. The girls made leaving impossible. Within days they were calling me Grandpa Walter, unprompted, uncorrected. They begged me to tell stories at bedtime, stories of my own childhood, of their father's age in another man, of the world before smartphones and screens. They followed me into the garden, peppered me with questions about tools, giggled when I pretended to grumble about chores. For the first time in years, mornings carried purpose. I woke not to silence, but to the laughter of children, to the smell of pancakes, to Marcus's voice asking about the day ahead. I found myself fixing things, not just broken hinges and leaky faucets, but pieces of myself I thought were gone forever. Yet beneath the joy, fear lingered. What if this was temporary? What if they grew tired of me, the way Derek had? What if I let myself believe I belonged, only to be cast aside again? One evening, after the girls were in bed and Elena had retired early, Marcus and I sat in the study again, the fire between us. He poured whiskey, but neither of us touched it immediately. He studied me with the same intensity as the night we first met. "Walter," he said at last, "I meant what I said. This isn't charity. This is family. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to prove anything. Just stay. Be with us. That's all we ask." I searched his face for doubt, for hesitation, but found only sincerity. My throat tightened. "It's hard for me to believe I could deserve this," I admitted. "Deserve?" Marcus leaned forward, his voice low but fierce. "My father deserved to hear me say I loved him before he died. He didn't get that. You deserved a son who saw your sacrifices instead of calling them a burden. You didn't get that. Life owes us both better. Maybe this is it." His words hit me like a wave, pulling down walls I hadn't realized I'd built. For the first time in decades, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone anymore. The turning point came one Saturday morning. Sophia had drawn a picture of the family, herself, Isabella, her parents and me standing tall in the middle, a smile stretching across my stick-figure face. Above it, in careful, uneven letters, she had written, "Grandpa Walter." When she handed it to me, her eyes shining with pride, something inside me broke wide open. I pulled her into my arms, holding her as though she were my own blood. And in that moment, I knew. Family isn't about blood. It's about who claims you, who sees you, who loves you, despite your cracks and scars. And I had been claimed. The seasons shifted, as if to mark the turning of my life. Winter melted into spring, snow giving way to budding trees and green fields that stretched around Marcus and Elena's estate. By then, I had fallen into a rhythm that felt almost like destiny. I woke early, sometimes before the sun, to walk the grounds, shovel the last of the lingering frost, or check on the repairs Marcus asked me to oversee at his commercial properties. Work came back to me like breathing, tightening bolts, replacing fixtures, patching drywall. I had missed the satisfaction of calloused hands and a sore back that meant something had been built, mended, improved. But more than the work, it was the sense of belonging that gave me strength. Each morning, the girls would come bounding into the kitchen where I sat with my coffee. "Good morning, Grandpa Walter." They'd chirp, their little arms wrapping around me as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And maybe, in time, it became natural. The sound of it no longer startled me, no longer felt like a borrowed title. It was mine. One afternoon, Sophia insisted I attend her school's spring concert. I hesitated at first, uncertain whether it was my place, but Elena smiled and pressed my hand. "It would mean the world to her," she said simply, and so I went. I'll never forget the moment Sophia scanned the crowd, her small body tense with nerves, until her eyes landed on me in the second row. She beamed, waving so hard, her teacher had to gently tug her arm down. That look, pure joy at knowing I was there, was worth more than any paycheck, more than any apology Derek could ever muster. Afterward, Isabella tugged at my hand, begging me to come to her class the following week to help with a career day project. I chuckled, asking what career she thought I had. Builder, she said with a grin. You build things, you fix things, you build us. Her words nearly undid me right there in the school hallway. At night, I sometimes sat alone on the back porch, watching the stars over the vast yard, listening to the faint sound of the girls' laughter drifting from their rooms. My truck still sat in the driveway, old and rusting, but it was no longer my home. For the first time in months, I had more than a place to sleep. I had a reason to wake. Still, Derek haunted my thoughts. I tried not to think of him, but some nights his face surfaced anyway. I wondered if he ever thought of me, if he regretted the words that had cast me out. But the silence from him was deafening. Not a call, not a text, not a letter. It was as though I had died, and he had chosen not to mourn. 6 weeks passed before the phone rang unexpectedly. The number was unfamiliar, but something in me knew before I answered. Dad? His voice. My heart stuttered. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Derek, I managed, my tone flat. How did you get this number? He hesitated. I called around, found Tom Patterson, your old boss. He gave it to me. I clenched my jaw, stepping outside so Marcus's tenants wouldn't overhear. What do you want, Derek? There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice trembled in a way I hadn't heard since he was a boy. I want to see you. Cheryl and I, we think we were too harsh. We want to make things right. My grip tightened on the phone. We had our talk 6 weeks ago. You made your position clear. Please, he said desperately, let me come. This weekend. I miss you. Every instinct told me to refuse. But blood, even when poisoned, has a way of pulling at you. Against my better judgment, I said quietly, Sunday afternoon. When I told Marcus and Elena, they exchanged a look heavy with caution. Marcus didn't say much, but Elena reached out, resting her hand on mine. Whatever happens, you're not alone anymore. Sunday came grey and cold, the sky heavy with clouds. I paced the living room, my stomach in knots, until the sound of tires on gravel broke the silence. Through the window, I watched Derek step out of his car, Cheryl trailing behind. His eyes widened at the sight of the mansion, awe and envy plain on his face. Cheryl's gaze was sharper, calculating, drinking in the grounds, the 3-car garage, the careful landscaping. Marcus opened the door, his posture polite but protective. You must be Derek, he said evenly. And you must be Marcus, Derek replied, turning on the charm that always rang false to me. Beautiful place you have here. Inside, he greeted me as though nothing had happened. Dad, he exclaimed. Arms spread wide, his smile strained. I didn't move from my seat by the fireplace. Derek, his smile faltered. Cheryl lingered behind him, her eyes darting over every expensive item in the room. After a few awkward pleasantries, Derek asked if we could speak privately. Marcus began to step out, but I shook my head. Stay. My voice was firmer than I expected. The moment Marcus settled back, Derek's facade cracked. His voice dropped, urgent. Dad, we're in trouble. My hours got cut at work. We're behind on the mortgage. The bank is threatening foreclosure. And there it was, the truth beneath his sudden reconciliation. I stared at him for a long time. So you thought you'd come here and what? Ask Marcus for money? Derek flinched. Cheryl jumped in quickly, her tone syrupy. Not money for us, Walter. But maybe if you put in a word, if you explained our situation, he'd be willing to help. For family. Family? The word was bitter on my tongue. 6 weeks ago, you made it very clear I wasn't family anymore. Cheryl's mask slipped, her smile tightening. We were upset. We didn't mean all those things. Which things? I pressed. That I was a burden, that I was worthless, that you couldn't wait to be rid of me? Derek's face flushed. We were under stress. I'm trying to save my family's home. The people you love don't throw you out into the cold, I said, my voice steady, sharper now. The people you love don't treat you like garbage when you're down. You don't get to call me family only when you need something. The room grew thick with silence. Then, from the stairs, a small voice broke it. Grandpa Walter, is everything okay? Sophia stood there in her Sunday dress, Isabella beside her, clutching a drawing. They ran in before I could stop them, holding up the picture proudly. It showed stick figures, Marcus, Elena, the girls, and me labeled Grandpa Walter. And the silence that followed was deafening. Derek's face drained of color. Cheryl's lips parted in shock. "This is your son?" Sophia asked innocently, studying Derek. "Yes," I said quietly. "Oh," Isabella brightened. "Then he's our cousin." Derek's jaw tightened, his pride cracking under the weight of two children's honesty. "No," he snapped, "I'm not your cousin. I'm his real family." Sophia tilted her head, her expression thoughtful in the way only children can be. "But he's our real family too." Elena appeared then, her voice calm but firm. "Girls, why don't you show Daddy your drawing in the office?" She ushered them gently away, though their words lingered like bells tolling truth. I turned back to Derek and Cheryl. "Do you see? They've given me what you never did, unconditional love. They didn't ask what I could give them. They just called me family." Cheryl's mask cracked completely, bitterness pouring out. "You're nothing but a charity project. Do you really think they'll keep you around when they get tired of their pet old man?" I stood tall, meeting her gaze. "Maybe. But I'd rather be a so-called charity project who's loved than a son who casts out his own father for convenience." Derek's fists clenched, his voice shook with anger. "If you walk away from us now, don't bother coming back. Ever." I felt the final thread snap inside me. "I won't," I said simply. He glared, then turned sharply toward the door. Cheryl followed, her heels clicking furiously against the polished floor. Within minutes, the sound of their car faded down the driveway, leaving behind only silence. Marcus placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "You did what you needed to do." I exhaled slowly, the weight of years lifting from my chest. For the first time, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt free. The weeks following Derek's visit were strange, almost surreal. For so long, I had lived with the gnawing ache of his rejection, the hope that somehow he might change his mind, reach out, admit he was wrong. When he finally did come, I realized it wasn't love that brought him to my doorstep, it was desperation. And when he walked away again, not with remorse but with anger, something inside me finally closed. Not in bitterness, but in clarity. I stopped waiting for his call. I stopped rehearsing the words I would say if he ever came back with sincerity. I let go of the illusion that my worth depended on his acceptance, and in that letting go, I found a peace I hadn't known in years. Marcus and Elena seemed to sense the shift in me. Marcus, especially, treated me with a new kind of respect, as though my choice to stand firm against Derek had solidified my place in their lives. The girls, of course, were oblivious to the storm that had passed. To them, I was just Grandpa Walter, the one who helped with homework, who braided rope for Girl Scouts, who built tree houses and mended scraped knees, and that was enough. 2 months after Derek's visit, Elena gave birth to a baby boy. The house filled with the sweet chaos of newborn cries, soft lullabies, and the steady rhythm of sleepless nights. I found myself pacing the floor with Michael in my arms, rocking him while Elena rested, remembering how I once did the same with Derek decades ago. The baby's tiny fingers curled around mine, his breath warm against my chest, and I felt a surge of love so fierce it startled me. One evening, Marcus found me in the nursery, the baby asleep against my shoulder. He leaned against the doorway, watching quietly. "You're a natural," he said softly. I looked down at the infant, my throat tight. "It feels like I've been waiting my whole life for this." Marcus stepped inside, lowering his voice. "Walter, I've been talking with Elena. We want to make things official, legal. We want to adopt you, adult adoption. The girls would officially be your granddaughters. Michael, your grandson. You'd be our father, our patriarch." For a long moment, I thought he was joking, but Marcus's eyes were steady, his tone serious. The word patriarch struck something deep inside me. I sank into the rocking chair, the weight of the baby grounding me as the magnitude of what Marcus was offering hit me. "Why?" I whispered. Marcus crouched, so we were eye level. "Because family should be more than words. You've already given us what we didn't know we were missing. We want you to never doubt where you belong. We want it in writing, legal, permanent. Elena appeared then, her hair mussed from rest, her smile soft but certain, because we want there to be no question that you're ours, and we're yours. Tears blurred my vision. For years, I had prayed for Derek to see me, to claim me, and here were strangers. No, not strangers. Family choosing me without hesitation. I nodded slowly, unable to speak. Elena crossed the room, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "Welcome home, Dad." From that day forward, everything changed. We began making plans for the adoption ceremony. The girls took it upon themselves to design decorations, insisting on banners and drawings, declaring me Grandpa forever. Marcus met with lawyers, his determination unshakable. Elena, despite the exhaustion of new motherhood, radiated joy, her strength holding us all together. But it wasn't just paperwork that bound me to them. It was the daily moments. Sophia running to me with her math homework, eyes shining with pride when she finally solved a tough problem. Isabella dragging me outside to play catch, insisting I cheer as loudly as I once did for Derek. Michael cooing in my arms, his tiny smile lighting up my world. And Marcus, he confided in me more and more. About business, about fears, about the pressure of being a provider. One evening, as we built shelves together in the garage, he paused, hammer in hand. "You know, I used to think success meant money, houses, deals, but watching you with the kids, I get it now. Success is family. It's knowing your children are safe, loved, guided. I wish my father could have known that." I put a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe he does. Maybe he's looking down, proud of what you've built." Marcus swallowed hard, then nodded. "Maybe so. But I know one thing for sure. Having you here, Walter, it feels like I finally got a second chance, and I'm not wasting it." 2 years passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. By then, the adoption was long complete. The girls had grown into bright, confident young ladies who never hesitated to introduce me as their grandfather. Michael toddled through the halls, his laughter echoing like music. And me, I had purpose, identity, love. On the anniversary of the night, I stopped to help them on the highway. Marcus surprised me with a gift, a brand new silver pickup truck gleaming in the driveway with a red ribbon tied around the bumper. "Happy Gotcha Day, Dad," he said, his voice thick with emotion. The girls cheered, running around the truck shouting, "Gotcha Day, Gotcha Day." I stood frozen, tears streaming down my face. "You didn't have to." Marcus shook his head firmly. "No, we wanted to, because that night you didn't just save us. You saved yourself. You saved all of us." Elena handed me the keys, her eyes shining. "Take us for a drive, Patriarch Walter." I laughed through the tears, pulling them all into my arms. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like an outsider looking in. I felt like the center of a family that had chosen me, claimed me, and loved me without condition. And as we piled into the truck, the girls squished between us, Michael on Elena's lap, Marcus grinning in the passenger seat. I realized something profound. Family isn't about who shares your blood. It's about who shares your life. The new truck sat gleaming in the driveway for days before I could bring myself to drive it alone. Every time I looked at it, a rush of emotions threatened to knock me off balance. It wasn't just a gift, it was a symbol, a declaration that I belonged, that I was more than an old man they pitied. It meant permanence. The girls insisted we take it everywhere, to school, to church, to the park, where they begged me to push them on the swings even though they were getting a little too big for it. Each time, they scrambled into the back seat, their laughter filling the cab. Michael would babble from his car seat, kicking his legs wildly. Elena sat beside him, radiant even when tired, while Marcus rode shotgun, pointing out shortcuts I'd learned by heart. It felt like a caravan of belonging, like every mile we drove together pressed the truth deeper into my soul. This was my family. One Saturday afternoon, Marcus and I worked in the yard building a playhouse for the kids. Sweat soaked through our shirts, the air buzzing with summer heat, sawdust clinging to our skin. As we hammered the final planks into place, Marcus leaned on his hammer and looked at me with a smile. "You know," he said, "I used to think about the father I lost every day. All the things I never said, all the moments we missed. But these past 2 years, it's different. When I look at you, Walter, I feel like I got him back. Maybe not the same man, but the same love." I swallowed hard, blinking against the sting in my eyes. "And when I look at you, Marcus, I see the son I thought I'd lost forever. Maybe not by blood, but in every way that counts." He nodded, and for a moment, silence stretched between us, heavy with gratitude. Then Sophia's voice rang out, breaking it. "Grandpa, the roof is crooked." We both burst into laughter, climbing down to admire their inspection. The playhouse stood sturdy, painted bright white with shutters the girls picked out themselves. To anyone else, it might have looked ordinary. To me, it was proof that the cracks in a man's life could be patched, rebuilt, made stronger than before. Later that summer, Elena gathered us all in the living room. Her eyes sparkled with mischief, her smile wide. She held a folder in her hands. "What's this?" I asked, watching her carefully. She handed it to me. Inside was a legal document. My name leapt off the page. "Marcus and I want to change our last name," she said softly. "All of us, to yours." "Oh." I stared at her, then at Marcus, then at the girls bouncing excitedly on the couch. You want to be the Boyd family." Marcus grinned. "It has a good ring to it, doesn't it? Marcus Boyd, Elena Boyd, Sophia, Isabella, and Michael Boyd. One name, one family." Tears burned my eyes as I set the papers down carefully, as though they were too precious to damage. "But your name, Chen, it's your legacy, your father's." Marcus shook his head. "My legacy is the family I build, and I want that legacy tied to the man who taught me what it really means to be a father. That's you, Walter." Sophia clapped her hands. "And then at the adoption ceremony, you'll be Patriarch Boyd." We already picked it out. "Patriarch Boyd," Isabella repeated solemnly, as though announcing a king. I laughed, wiping at my cheeks. "That's very distinguished." Marcus came closer, his voice thick. "This is our way of saying thank you, for saving us, for staying, for choosing us when you could have walked away." I looked at them, all of them, my heart swelling until it nearly broke. "No," I said softly, "you saved me." Time passed, marked not by loneliness anymore, but by milestones. Sophia's 10th birthday, with balloons covering the ceiling and her insisting I sit beside her for cake. Isabella's science fair, where we built a model bridge together, her proud grin outshining the blue ribbon she won. Michael's first steps, wobbly and triumphant, straight into my arms, while Elena laughed and clapped. I fixed broken shelves, mowed lawns, repaired leaky faucets, but those were small things. The bigger repairs were inside me, in places no one could see. Piece by piece, their love filled the hollow places Derek had carved out of me. Sometimes I thought of Derek still, wondering where he was, whether he and Cheryl had managed to keep their house. Word drifted back through mutual acquaintances. They hadn't. They'd lost it 6 months after that bitter visit. A part of me felt sorrow, but it was distant, like hearing of a stranger's misfortune. Derek had made his choice, and I had made mine. I chose love. I chose the family who chose me. On a crisp autumn evening, 2 years after the night that changed my life, Marcus called us all together in the study. The fire crackled, casting shadows across the room. He stood with Elena beside him, both holding hands, their faces glowing with anticipation. "We've spoken to the lawyer," Marcus began. "The adoption is finalized, and the name change, it's official." The girls squealed, jumping into my arms. "We're the Boyd family," Sophia shouted. Isabella hugged me tightly. "Forever family." I couldn't speak. My throat closed around the words, my eyes brimming with tears. For so long, I had believed my story ended in abandonment, in rejection, in loneliness. But here I was, surrounded by the laughter of children, the warmth of a son and daughter, not born of blood but of choice, the steady love of a family that was mine in every way that mattered. As I pulled them close, I whispered into their hair, "Yes, forever family." And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty I was finally home. If there's one lesson my story has taught me, it's this: family isn't always about blood. Sometimes the people who share your last name may never truly see you. And sometimes the people you stumble upon in the cold, on a lonely highway, will open their arms and give you everything you thought you'd lost forever. I spent years believing my worth depended on my son's approval, that if I just gave more, sacrificed more, he would finally see me. But life has a way of breaking our illusions. That night, Derek threw me out. I thought my story was ending. In truth, it was only beginning. Marcus, Elena, Sophia, Isabella, and little Michael showed me that love isn't something we earn, it's something we give freely, and something that grows the more we share it. They chose me, not because they had to, not because of obligation, but because they saw value in who I was, scars and all. And by choosing me, they taught me how to choose myself again. So if you've been cast aside, if you've ever been told you're worthless or a burden, hear me now. You are not. You are not defined by those who fail to love you. You are defined by the love you give, by the resilience that carries you through the cold nights, by the family you find along the way, whether by blood or by choice. I thought I had lost everything. But in truth, I gained more than I ever dreamed possible. I gained a family who calls me their own. I gained a place to belong. And most of all, I gained the courage to believe that my story wasn't over. If my journey has touched you, let it remind you of your own worth. Let it remind you that healing is possible, that new beginnings can rise from the ashes of old endings. And if this story has spoken to your heart, I ask you to stay with me, to keep listening, to keep sharing in these lessons of love and redemption. Your support means the world. It's what keeps these stories alive. Because at the end of the day, we all deserve a place to call home. We all deserve to be loved. And no matter how broken we feel, there's always a chance to be chosen again.